Humanity knows the sounds of war, the blare of the trumpet, the deep thunder of the war drum, the piercing shriek of an alarm. They are sounds of chaos, of violence, of a world breaking. They are designed to incite fear, to rally troops, to signal the moment that peace has ended and bloodshed has begun. But what of wars in heaven? What of conflicts fought not with iron and fire, but with will and light? When beings who are themselves composed of harmony and divine law are set to clash, what sound marks the beginning of their battle? It is not a sound of chaos. It is a sound of perfect, terrifying order. A sound so profound, it is only ever perceived as a silence. A great silence that stills the music of the cosmos and announces that a battle for the soul of reality itself is about to begin. To understand this silence, you must first comprehend the sound it replaces. Heaven is not a quiet place. It is a symphony. From the lowest angel to the highest seraph, every being, every choir contributes a note to a single, perfect, eternal harmony. The ancient philosophers called it musica universalis, the music of the spheres. It is the idea that the very movement of the planets, the orbits of stars, the vibration of light, and the thoughts of angels all produce a sound, a constant, interlocking, celestial song. This music is the sound of shalom, of divine peace. It is the sound of a universe in perfect alignment with the will of its creator. At its heart, as we have explored, is the eternal hymn of the seraphim, Holy, 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 the very heartbeat of creation, the rhythm to which all other harmonies are tuned. This symphony is the baseline of reality. It is the sound of God's unopposed love sustaining everything that is. It is the sound of peace. But peace has not always been unopposed. Angelic wars are not fought for territory, for resources, or for glory. They are wars of ideas. They are conflicts of ultimate truth. The first such war, the rebellion of Lucifer, was not a battle of swords, but a cataclysmic argument over the very nature of God and creation. It was a clash between two irreconcilable ideas. I will be like the Most High versus who is like God. This was the war that first broke the symphony. It introduced the first note of dissonance into the song of reality, the note of pride. Since that first fall, other spiritual wars have been fought, not always on such a grand cosmic scale, but in moments of pivotal importance for salvation history. These are not clashes of heavenly armies filling the sky. They are targeted, strategic conflicts for the soul of a nation, for the heart of a prophet, for the future of the church. They are fought in the unseen realms, in the spiritual substratum that underpins our physical world. A battle between an archangel and a demonic prince might determine the course of an empire, the survival of a people, or whether a divine revelation reaches humanity. But such a conflict is never entered into lightly. Heaven does not seek war. It is a realm of order and love. A direct, open confrontation between high-ranking celestial beings is a last resort, a spiritual surgery undertaken only when a cancer of deception or evil threatens to metastasize within creation. And because it is such a grave and momentous act, it is preceded by signs. The perfect harmony begins to crack. The signs are subtle, perceptible only to the highest orders of beings. A prayer from a saint on earth arrives in heaven, carrying a shadow of a new kind of despair. A demonic principality shifts its strategy, and the light of faith in a whole continent begins to dim, the celestial music in that region turning discordant. The hymns of the thrones of justice resonate with a new note of gravity. The cherubim of knowledge see a new lie taking root in the hearts of humanity, a lie that threatens to poison the future. These are the tremors, the growing dissonance in the great symphony. It is the sound of a coming spiritual earthquake. And when the moment arrives, when the conflict can no longer be avoided, when the will of God determines that a direct intervention is necessary, the signal is given, and that signal is silence. For a single immeasurable moment, by a divine decree that stills all of creation, the music stops. The song of the seraphim ceases. The vibration of the virtues who turn the galaxies is paused. The hum of the thrones is hushed. The entire cosmos, from the highest choir to the smallest atom, falls into a profound, absolute, and terrifying silence. This is not a peaceful silence. It is the silence of a held breath, the silence of a foundation being removed. For beings whose very existence is a form of music and light, this silence is the ultimate clarion call. It is the sound of God clearing the spiritual battlefield. It is the definitive announcement that the age of harmony has paused, and a new, terrible age of holy war has begun. This great silence has fallen only a few times in the long history of the cosmos. The first was just before Michael and his legions cast out the dragon, but it has been heard since, and each time it is heard, the heavens, the earth, and the fate of humanity are irrevocably changed. The great silence. Not an emptiness, but a presence, a deliberate and divine stillness that announces the beginning of a holy war. After it fell for the first time before the fall of Lucifer, the symphony of heaven was eventually restored, but the universe was forever changed. It now contained the memory of discord, and since that first rebellion, history suggests that the great silence has descended again in moments of pivotal crisis, when the very destiny of humanity hung in the balance. Consider the days of Noah. Scripture describes a world that had fallen into such profound spiritual sickness that the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. This was more than human sin. It was a fundamental perversion of creation itself. Ancient traditions speak of demonic influences, of a deep corruption that had intertwined itself with the lineage of humanity. To save mankind, God would have to perform a radical and painful spiritual surgery. Before the first drop of rain fell, before the fountains of the great deep were broken open, it is conceivable that the great silence descended. The music of creation ceased. This was the signal that a war was being declared, not on humanity, but for humanity. A war to cleanse the earth of the spiritual venom that had infected it, to bind the dark forces that held it captive, and to preserve a single righteous seed through which all of creation could be renewed. The flood was the physical echo of a spiritual battle that had just been won in the heavens. The silence was its starting gun. Centuries later, another war was declared. The descendants of Noah, the people of Israel, were slaves in Egypt, the greatest superpower of the ancient world. But their slavery was not merely physical. Egypt was a civilization built upon a pantheon of powerful gods, spiritual entities, demonic principalities who held the land in a grip of spiritual darkness. The God of Abraham had chosen this moment to liberate his people and reveal his name. But to do so, he would have to wage war not just against Pharaoh, but against his gods. When Moses stood before the burning bush, he received his mission. But when he stood before Pharaoh to make his demand, the great silence may well have fallen again. The battle was joined. Each of the 10 plagues was not a random natural disaster. It was a direct, strategic assault on the dominion of a specific Egyptian deity. The turning of the Nile to blood was a defeat for Hapi, the god of the river. The plague of darkness was a mockery of Ra, the mighty sun god. The death of the livestock was a judgment on Hathor, the cow goddess. This was a systematic dismantling of a demonic kingdom fought by celestial powers. It was a holy war, and the silence that preceded it was the announcement that the God of Israel was reclaiming his people and demonstrating his power over all other spiritual forces. But perhaps the most profound silence of all occurred not with a global flood or a clash of empires, but in the quiet of a desolate wilderness. After his baptism, Jesus Christ was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. For 40 days and 40 nights, the symphony of heaven may have ceased entirely. This was the rematch, the ultimate confrontation. The King of Heaven had voluntarily walked onto the battlefield alone. The second Adam had come to face the ancient serpent who had defeated the first. Satan's temptations were not idle suggestions. They were the most sophisticated strategic assaults ever conceived. An attack on physical need, an attack on spiritual pride, and an attack on worldly power. All of heaven held its breath. The war for the soul of humanity, for the success of the entire plan of salvation, was being waged in the will of one man in the silence of the desert. The silence did not break with a crash of thunder. It ended with 3 quiet words: "Be gone, Satan." And in that moment, the music of heaven did not simply resume. It exploded in a new song of triumph. The war was won. The enemy was defeated. And the scripture tells us, the angels came and were ministering to him. These were wars that defined our past, spiritual conflicts that shaped the world we know. But this great silence is not just a relic of ancient history. There is reason to believe it has been heard in more recent times, for battles that are still being fought today in our own era. The nature of these new wars is more subtle, but the stakes are just as high. To understand these modern spiritual conflicts and the role you might be playing in them without even knowing it, subscribe now to Celestium and do not miss what comes next. Because the silence is not just about the past, it is also a warning about the future. The great silence is a divine pause, a stillness in the cosmic symphony that precedes a declaration of holy war. In ancient times, it announced battles against fallen angels and corrupted empires. But the enemy of humanity is an intelligent, adaptive force. As history has unfolded, its methods of warfare have evolved. The battlefield has shifted. The wars of the modern age are not fought with plagues and floods, but with ideas, ideologies, and the subtle corrosion of the human soul. And with these new wars come new, more recent silences. Let us move forward in history to the end of the 18th century, the French Revolution. On the surface, it was a political struggle for liberty and equality, but in the spiritual realm, it was something far more sinister. This was one of the first organized, philosophical, and violent attempts to systematically erase God from a nation's soul. Churches were not just closed, they were desecrated. The Cathedral of Notre Dame was rededicated as a temple of reason. The sacred was actively mocked and replaced with a man-made cult. It is here that the Great Silence may have been heard again. This was a new kind of war. The Angelic conflict was not against a foreign army, but against a demonic ideology that had possessed the very heart of a Christian nation. The battle was to preserve the flame of faith in the hearts of a faithful remnant, while a storm of violent secularism raged around them. The enemy's goal was no longer just to mislead humanity, but to convince humanity that it no longer needed God at all. This new form of ideological warfare reached its terrifying apex in the 20th century. Never in human history has a single century witnessed such organized slaughter, such spiritual darkness. 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the gulags, the killing fields. Behind these political conflicts were powerful demonic ideologies, Nazism and communism. These were more than just systems of government. They were counterfeit religions. They demanded total worship, offered a false salvation, and sought to create a new man free from the shackles of traditional faith and morality. Could the Great Silence have descended upon the world in 1914 or in 1939? The visions of mystics and saints during this period, like those at Fatima, spoke of immense spiritual battles, of angels and demons clashing over the fate of nations. The war on earth was a mirror of a war in the heavens. The angelic hosts were not fighting men. They were fighting the powerful demonic principalities that had inspired these ideologies of death. The battle was for the very soul of the 20th century, a conflict so vast and brutal that its spiritual wounds are still felt today. This brings us to our time, the present moment. And the nature of the war has shifted once more, becoming quieter, more subtle, and perhaps more dangerous than ever before. The enemy has learned that direct, violent assault often creates martyrs and strengthens the faith of the remnant. A new, more effective strategy has been deployed, the strategy of noise. The current war is a war of distraction, a war of confusion, a war against silence itself. We live in an age of relativism where objective truth is seen as an oppression, an age of radical individualism where the self is enthroned as the only God that matters, and an age of constant, overwhelming digital noise where every moment of potential quiet is filled with notifications, entertainment, and endless scrolling. The goal is no longer to make you hate God. It is to make you so busy, so entertained, and so inwardly focused that you simply forget He exists. The greatest victory for the forces of darkness today is not your hatred. It is your indifference. So, has the Great Silence fallen in our lifetime? Or are we right now living within the long, drawn-out echo of a war that has already begun? A war where the primary weapon is the quiet suffocation of the soul. A war fought not in the trenches or the deserts, but in the silent choices you make every single day. The choice to pray or to scroll. The choice to seek truth or to accept comfort. The choice to listen for the divine harmony or to drown it out with the noise of the world. This means you are not a spectator to these great spiritual conflicts. You are on the battlefield. You are a soldier, whether you have enlisted or not. And in this war of noise and confusion, the most rebellious act you can perform is to find silence. The most powerful weapon you can wield is a quiet, focused, and listening heart. The final question, then, is not when the next silence will fall, but how you will respond to the one that may already be here. The conclusion is as inescapable as it is unsettling. You are not a neutral party in a war you cannot see. By virtue of your existence in this age of noise and confusion, you are on the battlefield. The great silence that precedes angelic war is not just a celestial phenomenon. It is a profound and personal call to attention, a signal that the time for passive belief is over. The silence from heaven is a call for a sound to rise from the earth. The question is, what sound can a single soul make that is powerful enough to be heard amidst the din of modern spiritual warfare? The answer is not to create a louder noise. The answer is to generate a different kind of sound. A sound that does not add to the world's static, but cuts through it. A sound forged in the inner silence of a consecrated heart. This is the counter-offensive. This is how you fight back. And this holy sound is composed of 3 distinct frequencies. The first is the sound of prayer. Not the rushed, recited words of a mind elsewhere, but the focused, intentional frequency of a heart turned towards its Creator. In a world that screams for your constant attention, the act of deliberately carving out time to be silent and speak to God is a revolutionary act. It is a declaration of allegiance. It is the sound of you dethroning the god of self and reaffirming your rightful king. This sound, this focused signal of a single soul, creates a pocket of divine order, a harmony that pushes back against the encroaching chaos. It is the sound that reminds heaven you are still listening. The second is the sound of truth. In an age that insists truth is relative, or worse, that it doesn't exist at all, bearing witness to what is true, good, and beautiful is a warrior's cry. This is not about winning arguments or shouting online. It is the quiet, firm sound of a life lived in accordance with reality. It is choosing not to repeat a popular lie. It is defending the sacred when it is mocked. It is raising your children in faith against the tide of a faithless culture. Every time you choose integrity over convenience, every time your actions align with the eternal truths, you generate a powerful vibration, a sound of reality that weakens the illusions of the enemy. The third and most powerful frequency is the sound of sacrifice. In a civilization built on the worship of comfort and self-gratification, any act of genuine, willed sacrifice is a spiritual shockwave. It is the sound that most closely mimics the harmony of heaven, for heaven runs on the logic of self-giving love. When you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it, you create this sound. When you give of your time or resources to someone in need without seeking recognition, you create this sound. When you deny your own comfort for a higher good, you create a sound that is utterly alien to the kingdom of darkness. It is the sound of love made manifest, and it is the one sound the enemy cannot counterfeit and cannot endure. God is not absent during the great silence. The silence is His call for our response. He breaks His own silence through the sounds we choose to make. Our prayers, our stand for truth, our acts of sacrificial love. These are the notes He uses to compose His new song of victory on earth. We are the instruments. We are the choir that answers the silence. By choosing to generate these holy sounds, you align yourself with the angelic hosts. You become a conscious soldier, a co-worker with the divine, actively fighting to restore harmony in your own corner of creation. The great silence, then, is not a cause for fear. It is a call to responsibility. It is the ultimate testament to your importance in God's plan. He has silenced His own symphony to listen for yours. If this message has called you to action and strengthened your resolve, support this channel's mission with a like. And now, make a sound in the digital world. Comment below. What is one way you can create a sound of truth or a sound of sacrifice in your life this week? Let your intention be a witness to others. The battle continues, but you are not unarmed. On your screen now are 2 more explorations into the unseen realities of our faith. Click on one to arm yourself further with knowledge and understanding. Stay vigilant, stay silent to the world, and make a holy noise for heaven.